And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story of a peculiar ailment, a phantom illness that once haunted the quiet corners of the world, a so-called disease that was, for so many, simply the condition of being a woman. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you wish, you can let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's a quiet comfort to know where these stories land. Alright, let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing. And together, let's allow the story to begin. It begins with a feeling. A quiet hum of discontent beneath the surface of your carefully curated life. You live in a world of muted colors, of heavy velvet curtains that keep the sun at a polite distance, and of clocks that tick with an unnerving, deliberate slowness. Your days are mapped out for you in a neat, orderly grid. Needlepoint in the morning, a chaperoned walk in the park if the weather is agreeable, perhaps some light correspondence in the afternoon. You are a porcelain doll on a carefully dusted shelf, and you are expected to be nothing more. But lately the porcelain feels like it might crack. It isn't a loud or violent feeling. It's a subtle friction. It's the way your breath catches in the tight grip of your corset. It's the sudden, overwhelming urge to laugh at a somber dinner party, or to weep when everyone else is smiling politely. It's a restlessness in your legs when you're supposed to be sitting still, a desire to run through a field instead of walking demurely down a manicured path. You have thoughts that you know are unladylike. You wonder about the ships in the harbor and where they are going. You secretly read newspaper articles about geology and politics, things that have no place in a woman's mind, and you hide them beneath your mattress like forbidden treasures. This is the very heart of the 19th century world you inhabit, a world governed by the doctrine of separate spheres. It's an unspoken rule, as solid as the brickwork of your home. The world outside, the world of commerce, intellect, and ambition belongs to the men. Your world is the one inside, the domestic sphere, the place of emotion, piety, and submission. You are the angel in the house, the quiet center of the family's moral universe. And angels are not supposed to feel bored. They are not supposed to feel trapped. Your mother worries about the novels you read with such fervor. There's a genuine fear whispered in parlors and printed in cautionary pamphlets that too many stories can give a woman ideas, that the thrilling plots and passionate characters can overstimulate a delicate female nervous system, leading to melancholy, fainting spells, and a general dissatisfaction with one's own, much plainer, existence. They call it novel reading fever, and it's just one of 100 small ways a woman can be deemed unwell for simply having a rich inner life. This feeling you have, this simmering discontent, it's a profound puzzle. You have everything a young woman of your station is supposed to want: a comfortable home, a respectable family, the prospect of a good marriage. To complain would be ungrateful. To feel unhappy is a kind of madness. And so you say nothing. You try to push the feeling down, to smooth it over like a wrinkle in a silk dress. But it remains. Historians and medical scholars still debate this very feeling you're having. Some look back and see the first whispers of what we might now diagnose as clinical anxiety or depression, real conditions that a rigid society had no language for, except to label them as a feminine failing. But others argue, quite convincingly, that this feeling is not a sickness at all. They say it is the only sane reaction to an insane situation, the natural chafing of a bright, capable mind against the bars of a gilded cage. Is your spirit ill, or is it simply trying to breathe in a room with no air? The question hangs unanswered in the quiet of your parlor. You try your best to perform the role expected of you. You smile at the appropriate times. You lower your eyes when addressed by a gentleman. You discuss the weather. But your performance is becoming strained. Your silences are a little too long. Your sighs are a little too deep. There is a storm gathering behind your eyes, a tempest of thoughts and feelings that have nowhere to go. and they are beginning to notice. The family, the servants, your mother. They see the way you stare into the middle distance at the dinner table. The way you sometimes press a hand to your chest as if to calm a fluttering bird. They see the cracks beginning to show in the porcelain, and their whispers have started to echo in the hallways, just beyond your closed door. The whispers grow from a faint murmur to a constant, worried hum that seems to follow you from room to room. It's in the way your mother's gaze lingers on you a moment to long after you answer a simple question. A look that mixes concern with a faint, sharp edge of disapproval. It's in the way the maids tidy your room with an exaggerated quietness, as if you were a sleeping invalid. Even when you're wide awake, staring out the window, they don't see a young woman with a restless mind. They see a delicate instrument slipping out of tune. Your habits, once considered charmingly eccentric, are now catalogued as evidence. That passion for reading, it's no longer a sign of a lively intellect, but of a dangerously overstimulated imagination. You've been found, more than once, with a book of poetry by your bedside, books filled with messy emotions and wild, untamed landscapes. These are not the gentle, moralizing tales deemed suitable for a woman's constitution. This is kindling for the nervous system. Then there's your sudden loss of appetite. At dinner, the roasted chicken and heavy pudding seem grotesque, impossible to stomach. You push the food around your plate, creating little patterns in the gravy. This isn't seen as a simple fluctuation. It's a sign of a deeper malaise, a physical manifestation of your troubled spirit. Your father, a man who believes most problems can be solved with a brisk walk and a hearty meal, grows visibly irritated by your refusal to eat. It feels like a rejection, not just of the food, but of the life he has provided for you. Your sleep is a traitor. You either lie awake for hours, your mind racing with unspeakable thoughts. What if you just walked out the front door and never came back, or you sleep too much? A heavy dream-filled slumber that leaves you feeling more exhausted than when you went to bed. They call it nervous exhaustion, a state as mysterious as it is alarming. Perhaps the most damning evidence is your fainting spell. It happened last week during a particularly stuffy afternoon tea. The conversation was a drone of gossip about people you barely knew. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and scones, and your corset felt like a vice. The room began to tilt, the chattering voices fading into a distant buzz. You remember the horrified gasp of your aunt as you slumped sideways in your chair, a disruption so profound it was almost scandalous. You weren't entirely unconscious, but floated in a strange, grey space for a moment, a brief, blessed escape from the suffocating politeness of it all. When you came to, you were on a chaise lounge with smelling salts waved under your nose, the center of a vortex of hushed panic. This single event becomes the focal point of the family's anxiety. Fainting, in your era, is a complex and theatrical act. For some women, it's an accepted, even fashionable, sign of delicate sensibilities. But for you, combined with your other symptoms, the reading, the melancholy, the lack of appetite, it's the final piece of a troubling puzzle. It confirms their fears. Something is fundamentally wrong. This is where a strange and now forgotten pseudoscience of the time comes into play. Physiognomies. It's the belief that a person's character and moral state can be read in their facial features and expressions. Your family, your neighbors, they've all been raised on this idea. They scrutinize your face for clues. Is there a new paleness to your skin? A slight, downward turn to your lips that wasn't there before? Are your eyes too bright, a sign of feverish intensity? Your own face becomes a text they are trying to decipher, and they are reading it as a tragedy in the making. Historians still debate the extent to which people genuinely believe these theories versus using them as a convenient way to enforce social norms. Was your aunt truly seeing a nervous disposition in your features, or was she simply seeing a young woman who was failing to conform? The family discussions escalate. Your name is spoken in low tones behind the closed doors of your father's study. Words like delicate, excitable, and unstable are used. They are not being cruel, not in their own minds. They are following the script that society has written for them. A daughter is a reflection of her family's stability and standing. Your behavior, your quiet rebellion against an expectation, is a crack in that reflection. And so, the decision is made. It is not a suggestion. It is an announcement. A doctor will be called. Not the regular family physician who deals with coughs and fevers, but a specialist. Eamon, known for his expertise in the most mysterious and troubling of all female conditions. The day the doctor is to arrive, the entire house holds its breath. The air is thick with the scent of lemon polish and a low-grade, simmering apprehension. You are dressed in your plainest day dress, the one with the high collar and the muted grey stripes. It's a costume, you realize, meant to present you as a chaste, simple, and troubled child. Your hair is pulled back so tightly that it makes your temples ache. You are being staged for inspection. You sit on the edge of the stiffest armchair in the parlor, your hands folded in your lap, a portrait of demure compliance. When he finally arrives, he is exactly as you pictured him. He is a man built of straight lines and sharp angles, from his severe, dark suit to the crisp, starched white collar that seems to hold his head at a permanent, slightly condescending angle. He smells of antiseptic soap and old paper. He doesn't smile, but offers a curt, professional nod to your parents before turning his gaze on you. It is not a warm or curious gaze. It is an assessing one. He looks at you the way a naturalist might look at a strange new insect he is about to pin to a board. The consultation begins, but it's not a conversation with you. Your father, voice slow and grave, recounts your symptoms, the melancholic moods, the disinterest in suitable pastimes, the alarming passion for poetry, the fainting spell. Your mother adds details in a hushed, tearful whisper, describing your lack of appetite and your nervous starts at any sudden noise. You sit in silence, listening to this inventory of your own soul. They are describing a stranger. Or rather, they are taking the most private, nuanced parts of you and flattening them into a list of clinical evidence. Your own voice, your own explanation, is not requested. It is not considered relevant data. The doctor listens, nodding slowly, his face a mask of serious concentration. He makes notes in a small leather-bound book with a silver clasp. You watch his pen scratch across the paper, turning your life into a medical record. He is a man whose entire profession seems to be the confident classification of things he cannot possibly understand. Then he turns to you. He asks you to hold out your hands. You comply, your palms facing upward. He doesn't touch them, but he studies them intently, a practice rooted in the idea that the hands betray the inner state. It's a peculiar, niche theory of the time that the hysterical hand is often pale, clammy, and prone to nervous fidgeting or dramatic tremors. Your hands, however, are perfectly still, which seems to disappoint him slightly, as if you are failing to perform your illness correctly. He asks you to stand and walk to the window and back. He observes your gait, your posture, your general bearing. Every natural movement you make is now a potential symptom. He has everything he needs. He clears his throat, and the small sound seems to echo in the tense silence of the room. He looks at your parents, a look of somber reassurance, the look of a man about to solve a difficult but familiar problem. It is a classic presentation, he says, his voice calm and authoritative. The symptoms are unmistakable. Your daughter is suffering from a condition of the nerves. It is called hysteria. The word hangs in the air. Hysteria. It is not a new word to you. You've heard it whispered about other women who were too loud, too emotional, too clever, too sad. It's a catch-all term, a vast, shadowy bin into which a century of female experiences are unceremoniously tossed. Anxiety, depression, frustration, intellectual ambition, sexual desire, trauma, or simple boredom, all of it could be filed away under that single, dismissive label. It is the perfect diagnosis for a society that needs a medical reason to justify its social expectations. Here lies a great debate that historians still wrestle with. Was this doctor, and others like him, engaged in a conscious act of social control, using a medical diagnosis to enforce conformity and punish women who stepped out of line, or was he operating genuine, if profoundly misguided, conviction? Did he truly believe he was a healer, using the best science of his day to soothe a suffering patient? As you look at his confident, untroubled face, you can't decide. Is he a jailer or a physician? The line between the two feels terrifyingly thin. Your parents are visibly relieved. To have a name for your condition is a comfort. It makes the problem real, tangible, and most importantly, treatable. It removes the uncomfortable suggestion that perhaps the problem is not with you, but with the world they have built around you. But for you, the word is not a relief. It is a sentence. It is a brand. You have been officially labeled as broken, your feelings invalidated, your very personality diagnosed as a disease. The quiet discontent that started it all now has a formal, medical title, and you have a chilling premonition that the cure will be far, far worse than the illness itself. Now that your condition has a name, the doctor feels it is his duty to explain its origins. He pulls a chair closer, assuming the air of a patient lecturer about to simplify a complex topic for a room of concerned but simple minds. He looks at your father, man to man, as if you and your mother are merely part of the scenery. The explanation he provides is not new, a theory so bizarre and so deeply ingrained in the medical consciousness that it has survived for over 2,000 years. He begins to speak of the uterus. He calls it by its Greek name, the hysterical, the very root of your new diagnosis. He describes it not as an organ, but as an independent creature, a restless animal living inside your body. According to this theory, which dates all the way back to the ancient Egyptians and was formalized by the Greeks, a woman's womb is not tethered in place. It is prone to wandering. He speaks of it as if it has a will of its own, a mischievous, trouble-making entity that, when unhappy, roams freely throughout the female body in search of moisture or satisfaction. You listen to this, trying to keep your expression placid, but inside, a sense of profound absurdity is blooming. He explains that if the womb wanders upwards, it can press against the diaphragm, causing a feeling of suffocation, fainting, and a lump in the throat, a classic hysterical symptom known as globus hystericus. If it wanders downwards, it can cause leg pains or paralysis. If it presses against the heart, it creates anxiety and palpitations. If it crowds the brain, it produces melancholy, irrational thoughts, and fits of weeping or laughter. In essence, he is telling you that a wayward internal organ is responsible for your love of poetry. This is the wandering womb theory, and it is, frankly, one of the most impressively durable pieces of medical nonsense in all of history. For centuries, it was the default explanation for any female ailment that couldn't be easily explained by a fever or a broken bone. It elegantly located the source of all female irrationality and emotion in a single, troublesome piece of anatomy, conveniently separating it from the mind, the soul, or the intellect, which were considered the pure domains of men. He explains that a woman's womb is particularly prone to restlessness under certain conditions. For instance, if a woman remains unmarried for too long, her womb might become might and dry and begin its troublesome travels. Conversely, a widow's womb, accustomed to a certain state, might become distressed and wander off in sorrow. Even a married woman could suffer if her life was not sufficiently occupied. This, he implies, is your problem. An idle mind has led to an idle womb. Your reading and your quiet contemplation have given it far too much freedom to roam. Historians are still fascinated by the sheer longevity of this idea. Why did it persist for so long, even into the supposedly enlightened age of 19th century science? Some argue it was simply a matter of medical conservatism, the reluctance to abandon the teachings of ancient authorities like Hippocrates and Galen. But a more critical view suggests that the theory was just too useful to discard. It provided a perfect scientific justification for keeping women in their place. If a woman's body was inherently unstable, governed by a rebellious, migrating organ, then of course she couldn't be trusted with things like education, property ownership, or the right to vote. Her biology was her destiny, and her destiny was to be managed. He even mentions some of the ancient cures for this condition, speaking of them with a sort of detached historical amusement. The Greeks, he notes, would try to lure the womb back to its proper place using smells. They would place foul-smelling substances like burning hair or sulfur near the woman's nose, while applying pleasant perfumes and sweet-smelling herbs to her lower body, hoping to coax the organ back down. You have a fleeting, horrifying image of this scene, and you have to suppress an nervous laugh that you know would be immediately noted down as another symptom. While he dismisses these ancient methods as primitive, the core logic remains chillingly similar. The problem, he concludes, is located within your female body. The solution is not to listen to your thoughts or understand your feelings, but to manage the physical vessel that houses them. He doesn't believe your womb is literally moving, not in the way the ancients did. The science has advanced, he assures your parents. They understand it is a disorder of the nerves that originates from a disturbance in the female reproductive system. It's the same idea, just dressed up in more modern, scientific-sounding language. The womb is no longer an animal, but it is still the prime suspect, the temperamental epicenter of your entire being. And the first step in calming it, he announces, is to prescribe a period of absolute and total rest. The doctor doesn't wait. The diagnosis has been made, and the treatment must begin immediately. The rest cure, he explains, is a modern, scientific approach developed by a brilliant American physician from Philadelphia. The name sounds gentle, almost pleasant, like a countryside holiday. The reality, as he lays it out in a series of crisp, non-negotiable commands, is anything but. He calls it a systematic treatment. The goal, he says, is to rebuild your depleted nervous energy. He talks about your body as if it were a bank account that has been ocean and intellectual activity. The cure is designed to force deposits back into this account. The method is simple. Absolute isolation and complete inactivity. You are to be confined to your bed, not just for a few days, but for 6 to 8 weeks, perhaps longer. You are not to get up, not to use the commode, not to wash yourself, not even to feed yourself. A nurse will be hired, a stranger who will manage your body as if it were a piece of delicate, malfunctioning machinery. You will become a passive object in your own life. Your room is to be stripped of all stimulation. Your beloved books are the first to go, removed from your shelves as if they were poison. Your writing desk, with its inkwellant paper, is cleared. No letters, no journals, no needlepoint. You are not to have visitors, save for a brief, supervised visit from the doctor himself. Your family is instructed to stay away lest their conversation excite your nerves. The world is to be shrunk down to the size of your mattress. You are led upstairs, not to your own familiar bedroom with its floral wallpaper and view of the garden, but to a spare room at the back of the house. It is chosen for its quietness and its dull, uninspiring view of a brick wall. The curtains are drawn, plunging the room into a permanent state of twilight. The message is clear. The outside world, the world of light and life and ideas, is now closed to you. The first few days are a blur of suffocating silence. The nurse, a stout woman named Mrs. Gable with efficient, unsympathetic hands, attends to you with a detached professionalism. She feeds you, bathes you, turns you over. She speaks only when necessary, in short, functional sentences. The hours stretch into an endless, elastic band of time, punctuated only by the arrival of a meal tray or the meal tray or the meal tray or the changing of the sheets. Your only task is to lie still and rest. But your mind, deprived of any input, does not rest. It screams, it races circles and turns in on itself, chewing over every memory, every frustration, every unspoken thought. The boredom is a physical presence, a heavy blanket that smothers you. This is the central paradox of the rest cure. It is designed to calm a troubled mind, but it creates the perfect conditions for anxiety and obsession to flourish. It's a bit like trying to put out a fire by locking it in a small room with a huge supply of oxygen. And here is a curious little detail that you can't help but notice from snippets of conversation you overhear. This very same doctor, when treating men for a similar condition, what they call neurasthenia or nervous exhaustion, prescribes the exact opposite. For them, the cure involves vigorous, stimulating activity. They are sent out west on cattle drives, encouraged to go hiking in the mountains, to engage in manly pursuits that will rebuild their strength. They call it the West cure. A man's nervous exhaustion, often brought on by the pressures of business and intellectual work, requires adventure and engagement with the world. Your nervous exhaustion, brought on by a lack of engagement with the world, requires sensory deprivation. Historians still debate the twisted logic behind this. Was Dr. Rater of the Rest Cure intentionally designing a treatment that reinforced female passivity, or did he truly believe that the female nervous system was so fundamentally different, so much more fragile, that it could only be healed by being completely shut down? Lying in semi-darkness, you don't care about his intentions. You only know the effect. You feel like a plant being deliberately starved of light. You are being cured of your intelligence, cured of your personality, cured of your soul. And in the quiet, clinical logic of your doctor, this is the first triumphant sign of the cure beginning to work. The process of dulling your spirit is not left to chance or to the simple absence of stimulation. It is a multisensory campaign, and the next front to be opened is your palate. As part of this comprehensive system for calming your overexcited nerves, you are prescribed a diet of exquisite blandness. The doctor believes that flavorful, rich, or spicy foods can act as stimulants, just like a thrilling novel or a passionate conversation. They are irritants to the system that must be eliminated, so the forced feeding of rich, fatty foods begins to change. Nurse Gable, following the doctor's new instructions to the letter, starts bringing you trays that are a study in beige and white. The new regimen is built around the most insipid foods imaginable. You are given boiled mutton, a meat so thoroughly cooked that any hint of flavor has long since fled, leaving only a stringy grayish mass. You are served cod, steamed without salt or lemon, its flesh pale and flaccid. Your vegetables are potatoes, boiled until they are on the verge of dissolving into a watery paste. Breakfast is a bowl of thin, unsweetened porridge or gruel. Lunch is a sliver of that boiled cod. Dinner is the mutton. Every day. The monotony is a form of torture all its own. There is no crunch, no spice, no sweetness, no zest, no sweetness, no bitterness. The food is simply a texture and a temperature, a lukewarm fuel to be consumed without comment or enjoyment. It is food as medicine, and the medicine is designed to be as uninteresting as possible. This dietary approach is rooted in a wider Victorian belief in the moral properties of food. There was a whole movement, championed by figures like Sylvester Graham, the man who gave us the Graham cracker, who argued that a Turian diet was key to a virtuous, temperate life. They believed that meat and spices inflamed the passions, leading to all sorts of undesirable behaviors and thoughts. While your doctor is not a full-blown Grahamite, he shares the core assumption that what you eat directly affects your character and your nervous disposition. By feeding you this culinary equivalent of a blank wall, he is attempting to engineer a blander, more docile version of you. You begin to dread the arrival of the meal tray, not because you are not hungry, you are never hungry, but because of the sheer, soul-crushing tedium of it. Each bite is an act of submission. You chew the pulpy mutton, you swallow the watery potato, and you feel something inside you shrinking. It's a strange and subtle form of control. By denying you the simple, human pleasure of a good meal, they are reinforcing the central message of the rest cure. Your desires do not matter. Your senses are not to be trusted. Your pleasure is not the goal. Here's a peculiar side note from the history of medicine. This obsession with bland diets for nervous patients had a long and surprisingly persistent life. Even decades later, well into the 20th century, hospital food for patients with all sorts of ailments often followed this philosophy. The idea that sick people needed bland, easily digestible food became a kind of medical dogma, ignoring the fact that a tasty, appealing meal can actually be a powerful tool for healing, boosting a patient's mood and will to recover. Your experience is an extreme version of a philosophy that would cast a long, flavorless shadow over institutional cooking for 100 years. Historians continue to debate the precise motivations behind these dietary restrictions. Was it purely a misguided application of a flawed medical theory about stimulants on the nervous system? Or was there a more punitive element at play? Some scholars suggest that the denial of flavorful food was another way to infantilize the patient. A child's palate is considered simple. An adult is complex. By feeding you food fit for a nursery, they were subtly reinforcing your new, childlike status. You are not a woman with complex tastes and desires. You are a patient, a body to be managed, whose basic inputs must be carefully controlled. You find yourself starting to fantasize about food in a way you never have before. You close your eyes and imagine the sharp, bright taste of a lemon, the rich, dark bitterness of coffee, the satisfying crunch of a fresh apple. These memories of taste become a form of secret, internal rebellion. They are a connection to the vibrant, sensory world that has been taken from you. You lie in your twilight rim, a ghost in your own life, and you dream of salt. It is a small, pathetic protest, but it is all you have left. The blandness, it seems, is not enough. The weeks of rest and the diet of beige have rendered you passive, it's true, but not chewed. The doctor, on his weekly visit, notes your continued listlessness. He sees not a spirit being crushed, but a stubborn reservoir of nervous energy that simply refuses to dissipate. Your body, he concludes, needs a more direct and efficient intervention to release its pent-up tensions. And so, one afternoon, he arrives not with his usual leather bag, but with a large, heavy-looking wooden case, reinforced with brass corners. Nurse Gable helps him place it by your bedside. It looks more like a case for a scientific instrument or a piece of industrial equipment than anything medical. He opens the lid with a theatrical little flourish, revealing a strange and formidable-looking device nestled in a bed of dark velvet. It is a contraption of polished wood. It is heavy, mechanical, and utterly alien. You have never seen anything like it. He explains in his usual calm, lecturing tone that your condition has led to a kind of pelvic congestion. He describes it as a traffic jam of nervous energy, a bottleneck in your system that is causing all your symptoms. To restore proper flow, this congestion must be relieved. Manually, he adds with a slight sigh, this can be a very tedious and time-consuming process for the physician. But this is progress. This is the modern age. He lifts the machine from its case. It is connected to a power source in the wall. A recent and still somewhat magical addition to your world. He is holding a medical massager, or as some call it, a vibrator. It is one of the very first electromechanical devices of its kind, a celebrated invention that promises to bring swift, scientific relief to the hysterical woman. There's a bizarre but true footnote in the history of medicine. The invention of this device was driven, in large part, by physician fatigue. The standard treatment for hysteria for centuries involved a doctor manually massaging the patient's pelvic region until a hysterical paroxysm was achieved. This was a purely clinical procedure, framed as a release of nervous tension, but it was physically demanding and could take the doctor a very long time. The vibrator was, in essence, a labor-saving device. It was a tool designed to make the doctor's job easier and faster. Your comfort or experience in the matter was, at best, a secondary consideration. Nurse Gable helps to position you. The whole procedure is conducted with a chilling, clinical detachment. There is no privacy. The doctor speaks in a low, instructional tone, as if narrating a scientific demonstration. The machine is switched on, and the quiet room is suddenly filled with a loud, buzzing hum, the sound of a trapped, angry insect. He applies the device. The sensation is shocking. It is nothing like a human touch. It's a deep, impersonal, mechanical vibration that seems to shake you to the bone. It is not painful, not exactly, but it is profoundly strange, an invasive force that your body has no idea how to interpret. You feel utterly disconnected from the experience, as if you are floating on the ceiling, watching this bizarre scene unfold below. You are an object, a piece of anatomy being acted upon by a machine. Your body, however, responds in a way your mind cannot comprehend. The built-up tension, the frustration, the weeks of suppressed emotion, it all culminates in a powerful, involuntary physical release. A wave of sensation washes over you, leaving you breathless and trembling. The doctor retracts the device and switches it off. The sudden silence in the room is deafening. He nods, a look of professional satisfaction on his face. There, he says, as if he had just successfully unblocked a stubborn drain. He makes a note in his little book. Paroxysm induced successfully. This physical climax, which you have no name for, is what he calls a hysterical paroxysm. In his medical framework, it is not a moment of pleasure. It is the expulsion of a sickness, a nervous spasm that signifies a successful treatment. Historians to this day engage in a sometimes heated debate over the mindset of these doctors. Did they truly not understand the sexual nature of what they were inducing? The consensus is that they had so thoroughly medicalized and desexualized the female body that they were able to see this act in a completely non-erotic, clinical light. They were treating a backed-up energy, as mechanically as a plumber would treat a clogged pipe. It was a spectacular, almost willful, act of clinical blindness, a refusal to see or name the obvious. As the doctor packs up his strange machine, You are left feeling shaky, profoundly confused, and deeply, deeply ashamed. You don't know what just happened, but you know it was a violation. It was an intimacy without any intimacy at all. It was another piece of you taken, analyzed, and filed away as a symptom successfully treated. The treatments continue, a relentless rotation of bed rest, bland food, and the bizarre humming machine. But a new and frustrating dynamic begins to emerge. You are not getting better. In fact, you feel worse. The brief, confusing release brought on by the doctor's device does nothing to soothe the deeper discontent that landed you here in the first place. If anything, the treatments amplify it. The humiliation, the helplessness, the sheer absurdity of it all builds inside you not as a pelvic congestion, but as a cold, hard knot of anger in your chest. You try once to voice this. During the doctor's weekly visit, you find a small pocket of courage. You choose your words carefully, trying to sound rational, not excitable. You tell him that the rest is making your mind feel foggy, that the lack of activity is making you feel weaker, not stronger. You try to explain that you feel a profound sadness that has nothing to do with a wandering womb or congested nerves. You are trying to give him a window into your actual experience. His reaction is a masterclass in professional dismissal. He doesn't even seem to disagree. He simply smiles a thin, patient smile, the kind one gives to a child who is talking nonsense. He picks up his little notebook. "Ah," he says with a knowing nod. Increased emotional ability. A tendency toward irrational complaints and exaggeration. A classic symptom of the hysterical temperament. And just like that, he takes your genuine, heartfelt testimony and twists it into another piece of evidence against you. Your very attempt to protest the treatment becomes a symptom that justifies the treatment's continuation. It is a perfect, inescapable loop. If you are placid and silent, you are responding well to the cure. If you weep or complain or express frustration, you are demonstrating the very illness that requires the cure. Your sanity is being interpreted by a system that is determined to find you insane. This creates a new kind of frustration, a specific and maddening feeling of being utterly unheard. You are in a soundproof room shouting, and the person on the other side of the glass just smiles and takes notes on your frantic gestures. This phenomenon, where the patient's own account of their suffering is systematically disbelieved or reinterpreted as a symptom, is something historians and sociologists have studied extensively. It's a key mechanism by which medical authority can be used to silence and control, particularly those in a less powerful position, like women in your era. You begin to feel a deep and corrosive despair. The spark of rebellion you once had is being systematically extinguished. What is the point of fighting when your fight is seen as part of the disease? You start to withdraw, to retreat deep inside yourself to a place they cannot reach. You become a master of the blank expression. You learn to say yes, doctor, and I'm feeling much calmer today. Thank you in a flat, monotone voice. Even when you feel like screaming, you are beginning to learn the art of performing sanity. It's during this period that you notice something peculiar about Nurse Gable. For weeks, she has been a starched uniformed automaton. But now, you catch fleeting moments of something else. A flicker of pity in her eyes when the doctor leaves. A moment of hesitation before she brings in another bowl of grey mutton. It's a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in her professional facade. There's a strange and debated theory among some medical historians that the nurses in these situations, the women who spent day in and day out with the hysterics, often had a far more nuanced and compassionate understanding of their patients than the doctors did. They were the ones who witnessed the quiet sobbing in the middle of the night, who saw the intelligence and wit that the doctors dismissed as excitability. But their role was to be silent, to be the doctor's hands and eyes, not his conscience. The doctor, however, sees only your external compliance. He is pleased. He believes the cure is fireman of science, a man who likes to see clear, measurable progress. Your case, he decides, is a stubborn one. The home environment, with all its lingering emotional attachments, might be hindering the final stages of your recovery. A more controlled, more scientific setting is required. He begins to talk to your parents about a new modern solution, a place specifically designed for cases like yours. a place of healing and tranquility. He calls it a hydropathy establishment or a sanatorium. The word sounds clean, and calm, and safe, but as he speaks, a cold dread washes over you. You are not being cured. You are being escalated. The doctor's suggestion of a hydropathy establishment is presented to your family as a hopeful, progressive step. He paints a picture of a tranquil retreat, a place in the countryside where the air is clean, the grounds are beautiful, and the treatments are the most modern and scientific available. It's not an asylum. He is quick to reassure them. An asylum is for the truly, hopelessly mad. This is a place for ladies. A place for the restoration of delicate nerves, run by experts. He uses words like spa, resort, and restorative. Your parents, exhausted by your lack of progress and desperate to believe in a solution, seize upon this idea with a sense of profound relief. It absolves them of responsibility. It places your difficult, incomprehensible case into the hands of professionals. The cost is considerable, a fact your father mentions with a sigh that is equal parts financial concern and paternal duty, but no expense can be spared for your health. The decision is made without your consent. You are informed. You will be leaving in a week. The days leading up to your departure are filled with a strange, hollow activity. Your mother packs a trunk for you, carefully folding your plainest dresses and sturdiest undergarments. She avoids looking you in the eye. There is a new distance between you, an invisible wall of clinical terminology and unspoken fear. You are no longer just her daughter. You are a patient, a problem to be managed. You are being sent away, not as a punishment. Everyone is very clear on that point, but for your own good. The distinction feels meaningless. You hear the term hydropathy repeated, and you understand it has something to do with water. The idea of water cures, or hydropathy, was immensely popular in the 19th century. It was seen as a natural, scientific alternative to the often harsh chemical treatments of mainstream medicine. The movement was started by a Silesian farmer named Vincent Price Snitz, who claimed to have learned the healing power of cold water by observing a wounded deer. From that rustic, almost folkloric origin, it blossomed into a massive industry, with grand establishments built all over Europe and America. These places promised to cure everything from gout to grief with a complex and highly regulated series of water-based treatments. It was a perfect fit for an illness like hysteria, which was considered a disease of the modern, over-civilized world. What could be a better antidote than the pure, natural, cleansing power of water? It sounded so wholesome. But as you lie in your bed, you can't shake a feeling of deep unease. You have overheard whispers, fragments of conversations, not meant for your ears. You know that these establishments are not just gentle spas, they are places of immense, almost absolute control. They are institutions with rules, routines, and a staff that wields total authority over the lives of the patient. Historians are still untangling the complex nature of these sanatoriums. On the one hand, they were part of a genuine reform movement, an attempt to create more humane and therapeutic environments for people with nervous disorders, a step up from the grim, prison-like asylums of the past. They often had beautiful architecture, lush gardens, and offered amenities like libraries and concert halls. But on the other hand, they were also businesses, and they were fundamentally institutions of confinement. For many women, especially those sent there by their families against their will, the line between a health resort and a prison was very, very thin. Was it a place of healing, or a place where inconvenient women could be politely, unfashionably hidden away? The answer, many scholars conclude, is that it was both at the same time. Your last night at home is sleepless. You lie awake listening to the familiar sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the distant chime of the grandfather clock. These sounds, which once felt so oppressive, now feel like a precious, fading connection to the world you know. Tomorrow, you will be taken to a new place, a place of strangers and strange rituals. You are being sent away to be cured of a disease you do not believe you have. And as you stare into the darkness, you realize you have never felt more alone or more afraid. The car ride the next day is a silent one. You sit beside your father, staring out the window at the passing countryside, feeling like a parcel being delivered to a destination you did not choose. The carriage ride feels impossibly long, a journey into a strange, new chapter of your life. After several hours, you turn off the main road and onto a winding gravel drive, flanked by perfectly manicured lawns and ancient, imposing oak trees. And then you see it. The hydropath icy establishment is not the grim, grey institution you had feared. It is, to your surprise, a sprawling and magnificent building, a masterpiece of Victorian Gothic architecture. It looks like a grand country hotel or a wealthy aristocrat's private estate, with ornate stone carvings, towering spires, and vast, glittering stained glass windows. The sheer beauty of the place is disorienting. It doesn't look like a prison. It looks like a palace. This, you realize, is a key part of its design and its appeal. The opulence is meant to be therapeutic in itself, to soothe the troubled mind with an environment of beauty, order, and wealth. It is a gilded cage, but the gilding is of the highest quality. Your father brings the carriage to a stop before a grand arched entrance. A porter in a crisp, dark green uniform emerges to take your trunk. As you step out of the carriage, you are met not by a stern warden, but by the superintendent of the establishment, a drive. Albright. He is a man with a practiced, reassuring smile and a soft, calming voice. He welcomes you with a warmth that feels both genuine and professionally calibrated. He speaks of your stay not as a restorative holiday. He refers to the other women here not as inmates but as guests. The language is deliberately soft, designed to erase the hard edges of your new reality. He gives you and your father a brief tour of the ground floor. You walk through a vast, sun-filled parlor, furnished with plush velvet sofas, elegant mahogany tables, and a grand piano in the corner. There is a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with leather-bound volumes, though you suspect the most exciting titles have been carefully removed. You pass a billiard room and a conservatory filled with exotic palms and orchids, their humid scent thick in the air. Everything is designed to project an image of leisurely, aristocratic life. This is not a place of sickness, it insists. This is a place of refined recuperation. This architectural style and internal design were no accident. The creators of these elite sanatoriums believed deeply in a theory known as moral treatment or moral architecture. The idea was that the physical environment itself could heal the mind. A chaotic, ugly environment would produce a chaotic, ugly mind. Therefore, a beautiful, orderly, and uplifting environment would encourage a return to mental harmony and rational thought. It was a beautiful idea in theory. Historians, however, point out a darker side. This very beauty and luxury served to mask the institution's true function of control. It made it easier for wealthy families to send their troublesome relatives away, assuaging their guilt with the knowledge that they were providing the very best of care in the most beautiful of settings. As you walk through these elegant rooms, you see the other guests. They are women, mostly. Women of your own class, dressed in simple but well-made gowns. They are strolling in the gardens, always in pairs or small groups. They are reading or pretending to read the approved placid books. They look calm. There is a strange, shared quietness about them, a lack of spontaneity. It's the quiet of a garden where all the wildflowers have been carefully weeded out. Your father is visibly impressed. This is exactly what the doctor promised. A safe, beautiful, and therapeutic environment. He can leave you here with a clear conscience, confident that you are in the best possible hands. The farewell is brief and awkward. He pats your shoulder, tells you to be a good girl and to listen to the doctors, and then he is gone. You watch the carriage disappear down the long, winding drive, and a gate, wrought iron and shaped like climbing roses, is closed quietly behind it. Dr. Ive, Albright's smile remains, but his tone shifts slightly. The performance for your father is over. He hands you over to a nurse, a woman with a kind but firm expression, who informs you she will show you to your room. As she leads you up a grand, sweeping staircase, away from the opulent public spaces, you feel the atmosphere begin to change. The carpets become thinner, the air cooler, the beautiful mask is beginning to slip, and you have a chilling sense that you are about to see the true face of the gilded cage. The nurse leads you down a long, quiet corridor on the second floor. This part of the building lacks the lavish decoration of the ground floor. The walls are painted a calm but sterile shade of pale green. The floors are bare and polished, and the air smells faintly of carbolic soap. The doors to the rooms are all identical, solid wood with a small, rectangular glass window set at eye level, a detail you notice with a prickle of unease. Your room is small, clean, and sparse. It contains a narrow iron frame bed, a small wooden wardrobe, a single straight-back chair, and a washed stand with a pitcher and bowl. There is one window, but it is fitted with a decorative but undeniably sturdy iron grille. The view is not of the beautiful gardens you saw from the front, but of a high brick wall. The nurse, whose name you learn is Nurse Evans, hands you a small printed booklet. The rules of the establishment, she says, her voice pleasant but leaving no room for argument. You will be expected to have learned them by morning. She then explains the daily routine, a schedule as rigid and unyielding as a train timetable. It will govern every moment of your waking life. Your day will begin at 6 a.m. sharp, woken by a bell. You will have 30 minutes to wash and dress. Breakfast is at 7 in the communal dining hall. From 8 until 10 is the treatment block, where you will be taken for your prescribed water therapies. 10 to 12 is for gentle, approved activity, which means either sitting in the parlor, doing needlework, or taking a supervised walk in the invalid's garden, a small, walled-off section of the grounds. Lunch is at 12:30. After lunch comes the mandatory rest period. From 1:30 until 4, you must lie on your bed in silence. You are not required to sleep, but you are not permitted to read, write, or talk. You must simply be still. At 4, there is tea, followed by another block of approved activity or treatments. Dinner is at 6. The evening is for quiet socialization in the parlor, perhaps some music from a hired pianist, or a reading from a suitably moral text by one of the staff. At 9 p.m., another bell signals the time to return to your rooms. Lights are extinguished at 9:30. The doors to the corridor are locked at 10. The rigidity of this schedule is a core component of your therapy. The doctors of the era believed that hysteria was a result of a chaotic, undisciplined inner life. Therefore, the cure was to impose an external life of absolute order and predictability. By controlling your every action, from the moment you wake to the moment you sleep, they believe they can retrain your mind, forcing it into healthier, more rational patterns. There is no room for spontaneity, no space for individual desire or impulse. You are a cog in a large, therapeutic machine. The rules in the booklet are even more detailed, covering every possible contingency. No food is to be kept in the rooms. All mail, both incoming and outgoing, will be read by the superintendent, Dr. Albright, to ensure it contains nothing overly stimulating or detrimental to your recovery. Private conversations between guests on the subject of their ailments or past lives are strictly forbidden, framed as a way to prevent morbid introspection. You are to be cheerful, compliant, and grateful for the care you are receiving. Here lies one of the most debated aspects of these institutions. Was this strict regimen a genuinely therapeutic tool designed to provide a sense of safety and structure for minds in turmoil? Or was it, as many critics argue, a system designed for maximum control and efficiency, treating patients less like individuals and more like inmates? Some historians argue that for certain patients, the predictability of the routine was indeed calming, whose illness is a craving for intellectual and personal freedom. This routine is not a comfort. It is a form of psychological straitjacket. As Nurse Evans prepares to leave, she points to the small glass window in your door. For your safety and well-being, she explains. The night staff will be checking on you every hour. The thought is chilling. You will never be truly alone. You will always be watched. The constant observation is framed as an act of care, but it feels like an act of surveillance. You are a subject under a microscope. As the door closes behind her with a solid, definitive click, you sit on the edge of the hard bed and the full weight of your new reality settles upon you. The beautiful facade of the Grand Hotel has vanished completely. This is a place of absolute, unyielding control. The next morning, you are escorted to the dining hall for breakfast. The room is as grand as the parlor, with a high, vaulted ceiling and long polished tables. but the atmosphere is anything but convivial. You sit on a hard wooden bench, assigned a specific spot, and you are served the familiar fare of thin porridge and weak tea. The women around you eat in a near-complete, unnerving silence. The only sounds are the scrape of spoons against bowls and the quiet, watchful footsteps of the nurses who patrol the aisles between the tables. You attempt to catch the eye of the woman sitting opposite you. She is young, perhaps a few years older than you, with intelligent eyes and a small, rebellious-looking smudge of ink on her finger that a nurse has clearly tried, and failed, to scrub off. The woman gives you a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, a fleeting look of shared understanding, before quickly looking back down at her porridge. It's a tiny gesture, but it's the first flicker of genuine human connection you felt since you arrived. As the days turn into a monotonous blur of bells and scheduled activities, you begin to learn the unspoken language of the establishment. You learn to distinguish the different nurses by the sound of their footsteps. You learn which chairs in the parlor are considered the most desirable, and you begin, in small, stolen moments of conversation during your supervised walks, to learn about the other women. And this is where you make a startling discovery. These women aren't the weak-minded, irrational creatures the doctor's diagnoses would suggest. The woman with the ink-stained finger, you learn, is a poet. Her family sent her here after she declared her intention to move to the city and pursue a literary career, a decision they deemed a sign of mental instability. Another woman, quiet and withdrawn, was a passionate amateur geologist. Her husband committed her after she began spending more time on fossil hunting expeditions than on her domestic duties. There is a gifted painter whose melancholy was brought on by the frustration of not being allowed to attend a real art academy. There is a woman who simply refused to marry the suitor her father had chosen for her. One by one, their stories emerge, not as tales of madness, but as stories of thwarted ambition, of frustrated intelligence, and of a deep, passionate nonconformity that the world had no place for. They are artists, writers, thinkers, rebels. They are guilty of the crime of wanting more than they were allowed, and for that, they have all been given the same diagnosis: hysteria. This is a historical point that is often lost in the clinical discussions of the diagnosis. The label of hysteria was not applied randomly. It was disproportionately applied to women who were intelligent, creative, and who challenged the rigid gender roles of the Victorian era. The diagnosis became a convenient and powerful tool for families and husbands to control women who were deemed difficult. If a woman was too opinionated, too emotional, too ambitious, or not submissive enough, a stay at a sanatorium, prescribed by a sympathetic doctor, was an effective way to bring her back in line. There is a fierce, ongoing debate among historians about the agency of these women. Were they purely victims of an oppressive system, or did some of them, in a strange way, find a form of freedom within the walls of the sanatorium? Some scholars argue that for certain women, being labeled ill was the only socially acceptable way to escape an intolerable domestic situation, like an abusive marriage or the crushing boredom of home life. They were at least free from their domestic duties and could find solidarity with other, like-minded women. It was a prison they had left behind was even worse. This doesn't excuse the cruelty of the system, but it adds a layer of complexity to the experience of the women within it. You find a strange, bittersweet comfort in the company of these other hysterics. In the outside world, you were an anomaly, a strange and broken thing. Here, surrounded by other intelligent, passionate women who have been punished for the very same qualities you feel, for the first time, profoundly understood. You are not alone. You share quiet jokes, rolling your eyes at the ridiculous platitudes offered by the doctors. You secretly trade books of forbidden poetry, passing them from hand to hand when the nurses aren't looking. You find a sisterhood, a secret society of the sane who have been declared mad. It is a small but powerful act of rebellion, a quiet insistence on your own reality in a place designed to erase it. Your time for gentle, approved activity comes to an end, and the bell rings, signaling the beginning of the treatment block. A nurse with strong, impassive arms escorts you and a few other women from your wing down to the lower levels of the building. The air grows cooler and damper as you descend, and a new smell fills the air, the clean, sharp scent of chlorinated water, mixed with the damp, earthy smell of wet stone. You have arrived at the heart of the hydropathic establishment. The room is vast and cavernous, like a subterranean cathedral. The walls are lined with gleaming white tiles that reflect the pale light from the high frosted windows. The air is filled with the hiss of steam, the rush of running water, and the echoing drips that fall from a complex web of brass and copper pipes crisscrossing the ceiling. It is a formidable, intimidating space, an engine room for the water cure. You are instructed to undress behind a thin cotton screen and put on a coarse, shapeless linen shift. You are then laid, shivering, to the first of your prescribed treatments. It is called the jet douche. You are told to stand against a cold, tiled wall. Across the room, a nurse, an attendant, stands behind a formidable-looking apparatus, a large brass nozzle mounted on a swivel joint and connected to a thick canvas hose. On the doctor's order, she turns a large wheel, and a jet of ice-cold water erupts from the nozzle, striking you with the force of a physical blow. It hits you in the chest, the back, the legs. The shock of it steals your breath, and you gasp, but the sound is lost in the roar of the water. Your skin tingles, then burns, then goes numb. The attendant methodically directs the stream over your entire body for what feels like an eternity, but is probably only a minute or two. As it was explained in dry, clinical terms, is that the powerful shock of the cold water will jolt the nervous system out of its lethargic, morbid state, stimulating circulation and restoring vital energy. But that is just the beginning. From the jet douche, you are hurried to the needle bath, a claustrophobic circular stall lined with pipes pierced with tiny holes. When the water is turned on, you are sprayed from every direction at once with fine, stinging jets of alternating hot and cold water. It's a bewildering, chaotic assault on your senses. One moment your skin is scalded, the next it is frozen. This is the core of the heroic age of hydrotherapy. It wasn't about gentle, relaxing soaks. It was an aggressive, interventionist therapy designed to produce a powerful physiological reaction. The doctors believed they were battling a disease, and they used water as their weapon. The treatments were often prescribed with a kind of military precision, the exact temperature, pressure, and duration all carefully calibrated by the physician. Here's a bizarre and slightly terrifying detail from the annals of hydrotherapy. For the most stubborn cases of hysteria, a treatment called the prolonged bath was sometimes used. This involved immersing a patient in a tub of tepid water for hours, sometimes even days on end. The patient would be covered with a canvas sheet, with only their head exposed, and would be fed and attended to in the tub. The goal was to produce a state of utter exhaustion and submission, breaking the will of the resistant patient. Historians are still trying to understand the mindset behind such brutal treatments. Were the doctors simply sadists using medicine as a cover for cruelty? The consensus is, for the most part, no. They were operating within a medical paradigm that saw the body as a system of humors and energies that needed to be shocked back into balance. They genuinely believed these treatments were curative. They recorded their patients' reactions, the screaming, the shivering, the pleading, not as signs of torture, but as evidence that the treatment was working, that a powerful, therapeutic reaction was underway. It was a profound and terrifying disconnect between the doctor's intention and the patient's experience. After the needle bath, you are wrapped tightly in a cold, wet sheet, a mummy in damp linen. You are then placed on a narrow cotton covered with a mountain of heavy woolen blankets. This is the wet sheet pack. The initial cold is agonizing, but slowly, your body heat begins to warm the sheet, creating a personal steam bath inside your cocoon. You lie there, immobilized, sweating profusely for another hour. Your body is limp, your mind is blank. You have no energy left to fight, or think, or even feel. You have reached the state of placid exhaustion that the doctors call calm. As you are finally unwrapped, weak and trembling, you realize the truth of the water cure. It's not designed to heal you. It's designed to break you. The physical ordeal of the water cure is only one dimension of your new life. The other, and in many ways more draining, is the constant, unblinking observation. From the moment the morning bell rings to the moment your lamp is extinguished, you are under surveillance. Your every action, every word, every sigh is noted, recorded, and interpreted. The nurses are the primary agents of this observation. They move through the establishment with a practiced, unobtrusive quietness, but their eyes are always busy. They watch you in the dining hall to see how you eat. Is your appetite improving or declining? They watch you in the parlor to see who you talk to, and what your demeanor is. Are you cheerful, morose, or excitable? They watch you during your supervised walks in the garden, noting your pace and posture. You feel like a specimen in a glass jar, perpetually studied. This surveillance is formalized in the patient records. Each evening, the nurses from each wing sit down and write detailed notes on every single patient under their care. These ledgers are a fascinating, unchilling historical artifact. They are a minute-by-minute institutional life. A typical entry might read: Miss seemed withdrawn at breakfast. Ate only half her porridge. Wept quietly for 10 minutes during the afternoon rest period. Refused to participate in the parlor music in the evening. Appears to be in a morbid state of introspection. Your life is being turned into a data set, and the data is being analyzed for signs of sickness or health. A cheerful comment is noted as improved mood. A sad expression is a return to melancholia. A heated debate with another patient over a book is recorded as a worrying display of intellectual aggression. There is no room for the normal, messy spectrum of human emotion. Every feeling is patholorized, flattened into a clinical symptom on a chart. This practice of constant note-taking and observation was a hallmark of the 19th century asylum and sanatorium. It was born out of the era's passion for scientific classification. Doctors believed that if they could just gather enough data, they could crack the code of madness, identifying its patterns and predicting its course. They were creating a science of the mind, but it was a science that had no room for the soul. And here is a deeply ironic and little-known fact. Many of the women subjected to this observation were, themselves, prolific observers and writers. Women in the 19th century were often the primary keepers of family diaries and correspondence, meticulously documenting the daily lives and emotional states of those around them. Now, in the sanatorium, this very skill for detailed observation was turned against them. Their own lives documented with a clinical detachment they would never have used on their own loved ones. The most unnerving aspect of this surveillance is the small glass window in your door, the Judas window. At night, after the corridor has been locked, you lie in the near darkness, knowing that at any moment, a face might appear in that small rectangle of glass. It's the face of the night nurse, making her early rounds. You learn to feign sleep, to control your breathing, to lie perfectly still, because you know that any sign of restlessness, tossing and turning, a muffled sob into your pillow will be duly recorded in the ledger and discussed by the doctors the next morning. Your own bed is not a private space. Even your sleep is not your own. Historians still debate the true purpose of this relentless observation. Was it, as the doctors claimed, a necessary tool for monitoring a patient's health and ensuring their safety? Or was it, as many critics contend, a mechanism of power and control? The act of being constantly watched is, in itself, a powerful force for behavioral modification. When you know you are being observed, you begin to police yourself. You start to perform the role of the good patient. You smile when you don't feel happy. You make pleasant, empty conversation. You suppress any sign of anger or frustration. You learn to wear a mask of placid sanity, hoping that if you wear it for long enough, they will finally believe it is your true face and let you go. The surveillance doesn't just record your behavior. It actively shapes it, molding you into the compliant, subdued woman the institution wants you to be. In the hushed, controlled environment of the sanatorium, news from the outside world is a rare and precious commodity. It arrives in the form of censored letters or we call newspapers, but mostly, it travels as gossip, whispered from patient to patient, from nurse to nurse, and for months now, one name has dominated these secret conversations: Charcot. Dr. J. Martin Charcot. He is a physician in Paris at the famous Salpêtrière Hospital. He is not just another doctor. He is a superstar, a celebrity scientist whose name is spoken with a mixture of awe and fear. He is, everyone agrees, the world's foremost authority on hysteria. You hear stories about his famous Tuesday lectures. They are not dry, academic affairs. They are grand theatrical events. The lecture hall is packed with doctors, students, artists, writers, and society ladies, all eager to witness the master at work. Charcot, a man with a commanding presence and a flair for the dramatic, brings his hysterical patients onto the stage, one by one. And there, in the spotlight, he demonstrates their symptoms. He doesn't just describe the illness. He provokes it, using techniques like hypnotism or applying pressure to what he calls hysterogenic zones on the patient's body. He can induce their symptoms on command. He can make a woman's arm go rigid and paralyzed. He can trigger a swoon, a fit of convulsions, or a dramatic, arching posture. He is famously named the Archangel. The patient becomes a performer in a medical drama, a suffering a spectacle for a captivated audience. This is a revolutionary and deeply troubling development in the history of your supposed illness. Charcot is moving hysteria out of the quiet private sphere and into the public, scientific spotlight. He is insisting that it is not just a vague female complaint, but a genuine, diagnosable neurological disorder with a predictable, for-stage grand attack, much like an epileptic seizure. He is giving it scientific legitimacy. But the nature of that legitimacy is what you and the other women whisper about. You hear that Charcot's favorite patients, the stars of his lectures like a woman named Blanche Whitman, have become famous in their own right. They are photographed, sketched, and written about. They are collaborating with the doctor in a strange, complex performance. And this is where a major historical debate still rages. What was really happening in Charcot's lecture hall? Was he a brilliant clinician, objectively demonstrating the real symptoms of a neurological disease? Or was he perhaps unconsciously directing his patients, who, in their desire to please the powerful doctor and in the highly suggestive atmosphere of the hypnotic trance, began to perform the very symptoms he expected to see? Was the famous for-stage hysterical attack a naturally occurring phenomenon, or was it an elaborate piece of theater, co-created by a charismatic doctor and his highly suggestible patients? This theory, that the patients were essentially acting out a script provided by the doctor, is known as the culture-bound syndrome argument. It suggests that the symptoms of hysteria were not universal, but were shaped by the specific cultural and medical expectations of the time. Charcot's lectures in this view, they help to create it, providing a powerful model of what a proper hysterical attack should look like. A particularly strange and telling detail you overhear is Charcot's use of photography. He established a dedicated photographic workshop at the Salpêtrière, creating a vast visual archive of his patients. These photographs are not candid snapshots. They are carefully staged, posed to capture the most dramatic and typical expressions of hysteria: the contorted limbs, the ecstatic gazes, the theatrical swoons. Their bodies used to illustrate a medical textbook in the making. The news of Charcot and his methods sends a ripple of fear through your small community. The idea that a doctor could induce your deepest anxieties and physical pains for the entertainment and education of a crowd is horrifying. But there is another, more subtle fear. Your own doctors at the sanatorium are disciples of Charcot. They admire his scientific approach. You see it in the way they start looking at you, searching for the classic signs, the textbook postures. You feel a new pressure, not just to be command compliant, but to have the correct kind of illness. The spectacle of Paris feels a long way off, but its shadow has reached you, here in your quiet, gilded cage. The influence of Dr. Jarve. Charcot and his scientific approach begins to seep into the very fabric of your life at the sanatorium. You notice a shift in the way the doctors interact with you. There is a new air of clinical detachment, a desire to categorize and classify every aspect of your being. Your personal, subjective experience of sadness or frustration is becoming less important than how neatly your symptoms fit into their expanding charts and diagrams. One day, during your weekly assessment with Dr. Ive Albright, you see it on his desk. It's a new medical textbook, fresh from Paris, filled with detailed illustrations based on Charcot's famous photographs. Dr. Hyde shows you a page, his finger tapping on a drawing of a woman in the throes of a classic hysterical attack. The illustration breaks the attack down into distinct phases, each with a precise label, like a diagram of an engine. There is the leptoid phase, the phase of large movements, the phase of hallucinatory attitudes. He then shows you another chart. It's a drawing of the female body, but it looks more like a butcher's diagram. It is covered in dots and labels, indicating the locations of the so-called hysterogenic zones. These are the points that, when pressed, are supposed to trigger a hysterical fit. The abdomen, the throat, the top of the head all mapped out as potential triggers for your illness. Your body has been transformed into a schematic, a territory to be explored and controlled by the medical gaze. You are being turned into a scientific category. This is the great project of late 19th century medicine. To create a complete taxonomy of human ailment and behavior. Just as botanists were classifying plants and entomologists were classifying insects, these doctors of the mind, or aliens as they were sometimes called, were attempting to classify the soul. They created elaborate systems with dozens of subtypes and variations of hysteria. There was hysterical somnambulism, hysterical anorexia, and even hysterical sneezing. Every possible deviation from the norm of quiet, placid femininity was given all at unsounding label and a place on the chart. This drive to classify is powerful, and it has a profound effect on you. When drive, Albright begins to gently palpate the areas on your body marked on his chart, asking, does this produce any particular sensation? You are caught in an impossible bind. If you say no, you are being uncooperative, a difficult patient. If you say yes, you are validating his methods, confirming that you are indeed the textbook case he wants you to be. The power of suggestion is immense. You begin to doubt your own sensations. Is that a flutter in your stomach because you are nervous, or is it a sign that he has located a hysterogenic zone? Here's a small but fascinating historical detail that reveals the absurdity of this classifying impulse. Some doctors became so specialized that they focused on single-minute symptoms. There were papers published on the hysterical yawn and detailed analyses of the specific tonalities of the hysterical cough. The female experience was being dissected into 1,000 tiny, pathological pieces, each one examined under a microscope, completely removed from the context of the woman's actual life and circumstances. The fundamental debate that still surrounds this practice is about what was really being classified. Were these doctors truly identifying and categorizing the symptoms of a real neurological disease? Or were they simply creating a pseudo-scientific catalogue of female unhappiness? Many modern historians argue for the latter. They suggest that these elaborate charts and diagrams were not a map of a disease, but a map of a society's anxieties about women. Each category, each label, corresponds to a behavior that challenged the Victorian ideal of womanhood. As you sit and drive, Albright's office, looking at the diagram of your own body as a collection of trigger points, you feel a profound sense of alienation. You are not a person anymore. You are a collection of potential symptoms, a specimen to be cross-referenced with a textbook. They are not trying to understand you. They are trying to solve you, like a puzzle. The irony is that in their obsessive quest to make your illness logical and predictable, to fit you into a neat box, they are ignoring the most logical explanation of all, that you are a human being who is suffering not from a flaw in your nerves, but from a deep and righteous discontent with the suffocating smallness of the box they have built for you. During another of your sessions with Dr. Albright, he tries a new line of questioning. He is moving away from the purely physical, from the charts of trigger points and convulsive stages. He is now probing into your past, your personality, your ambitions. He asks with a thinly veiled air of disapproval about the books you used to read. He asks you to describe your daydreams, your hopes for the future before you became unwell. You are cautious at first, but a small, defiant part of you decides to tell the truth. You speak of your desire to travel, to see the world beyond your small town. You mention your fascination with science, your secret hope of one day attending a university, an idea that is still radical, almost unthinkable for a woman. You talk about your frustration with the endless, repetitive cycle of domestic tasks, your feeling that your mind was a powerful engine that had been hitched to a tiny, decorative cart. You speak with a quiet passion, forgetting for a moment where you are. You are trying to explain the root of your unhappiness, to make him see that it is not a random malfunction of your nerves, but a logical response to a starved, unlimited life. Dr. Albright listens patiently, nodding and making notes. When you have finished, he looks at you, not with the empathy you had hoped for, but with a look of clinical triumph. It is the look of a detective who has just found the final damning clue. "I see," he says, his voice soft but heavy with meaning. A classic case of intellectual overstimulation. Your ambitions, your desire to step outside your natural, God-given sphere. This is not the cause of your unhappiness, my dear girl. It is the primary symptom of your disease. And there it is, the core unspoken diagnosis, laid bare. Your very ambition is being framed as pathology. The parts of you that you consider your strengths, your curiosity, your intellect, your desire for a life of purpose, are being officially labeled as the source of your sickness. In the medical view of your era, the female constitution, both physical and mental, is considered inherently delicate. It is designed by nature for the quiet, emotional work of the home and family. To strive for the intellectual rigor and competitive stress of the male world is to go against that nature. It is a form of biological rebellion, and the result, they believe, is an inevitable breakdown of the nervous system, hysteria. This medical justification for limiting women's education and ambition was incredibly widespread and powerful. Prominent doctors published influential books and articles warning of the grave dangers of higher education for women. They argued, with a great display of scientific authority, that the rigors of academic study would divert a woman's limited vital energy away from her reproductive organs and towards her brain. The terrifying result, they claimed, would be a generation of educated but sterile, sickly, and unsexed women. The uterus and the brain were seen as being in direct competition, a zero-sum game for the body's resources. Here is a strange but illustrative detail of this debate. Some doctors went so far as to study the first generation of female college graduates, measuring their skulls, tracking their menstrual cycles, and compiling statistics on their marriage rates and number of children. They were desperately searching for scientific proof that education was physically ruining women. The fact that they found no such evidence did little to dampen their conviction. This is a point where historians see the intersection of medicine and social control in its starkest form. The debate over whether this was conscious misogyny or a genuine, if deeply flawed, scientific belief is ongoing. Many doctors likely believed they were acting in women's best interests, protecting them from a path that their supposedly fragile biology could not handle, but the effect was the same, regardless of the intention. Medicine was being used to provide a scientific rationale for maintaining the existing social order. It gave fathers and husbands a medical reason to say no to their daughters' and wives' ambitions. It wasn't about denying them opportunities. It was about protecting their health. As you sit and drive, Albright's office, the full, crushing weight of this logic settles on you. You have been checkmated. You cannot argue for your own mind without being accused of being mindless. You cannot defend your ambition without it being used as proof of your illness. The very thing you are fighting for is the thing they are trying to cure you of. The cage has no door. The realization that your very mind has been diagnosed as a disease should be the final crushing blow. And for a time it is. You drift through the rigid schedule of the sanatorium in a state of profound numbness. You perform the role of the good patient with a chilling new perfection. You are placid, you are quiet, you are empty. This is their definition of cured. You are an angel in the asylum, and your wings have been clipped. But the human spirit, even when systematically starved, has a stubborn, weed-like ability to survive in the smallest of cracks. Your moment of rebellion does not come in a great storm of anger, but in a quiet, accidental discovery. One afternoon, a fresh pile of laundry is delivered to your room. As you are folding one of your simple, drab dresses, your fingers find a small, hard lump in the pocket. Your first thought is that it's a stone or a button that has come loose. But when you pull it out, your breath catches in your throat. It is a pencil stub. It is tiny, no longer than your thumb, worn down to a nub, its graphite tip chipped. It must have been left in your pocket from your life before, surviving the institutional washing machines. It is a relic from another world, a piece of your former self. In the sterile, controlled environment of the sanatorium, it feels like a magical artifact, a talisman of immense power. That night, for the first time in months, you do not try to sleep. You lie in your narrow bed, the pencil stub clutched in your hand, its sharp edges pressing into your palm. You are terrified. To be found with it would be a disaster. It would be seen as proof of your incurable intellectual obsessions, a sign of deceit. It could lead to harsher treatments, to the removal of your few remaining privileges. But the fear is overshadowed by a fierce, desperate need. The need to do the one thing they have so completely forbidden you. The need to write. You have no paper. But you have a book. It's one of the few books allowed to patients, a volume of painfully dull sermons, chosen for its complete lack of stimulating content. After the night nurse has made her rounds, her face appearing for a moment in the Judas window before moving on, you slide out of bed, in the faint moonlight slanting through the barred window. You open the book to a page with wide, empty margins. Your hand is trembling. The pencil feels clumsy and foreign in your fingers. At first, you can't think of what to write. Your mind, so long suppressed, feels like a stiff, unused muscle. So you start with a single word. You write your own name, seeing it there, in your own handwriting, in the margins of their approved text, is a jolt, a silent shout of existence. I am here. Then you write another word, window. Then a sentence. The moon is behind the bars tonight. It is not poetry. It is not profound. But it is true. It is your truth, your observation, a tiny piece of reality that you have captured and claimed as your own. You fill the margins, night after night, with these small, stolen thoughts. You write about the taste of the bland porridge, the feel of the cold water jets, the face of the poet with the ink-stained finger. You are creating a secret record, a counter-narrative to the clinical lies being written about you in the nurse's ledgers. This act of secret writing was a vital form of survival for many people confined in institutions. Historians and literary scholars have discovered incredible examples of this. They found poems scratched into the plaster of asylum walls, journals written on toilet paper and hidden under floorboards, intricate codes and private languages developed by patients to communicate past the ever-watchful eyes of their keepers. It speaks to a fundamental human need, the need to tell one's own story. The debate among historians is whether these acts should be seen as simple coping mechanisms, a way to stay sane in an insane environment, or as conscious acts of resistance. Was your secret writing just a form of therapy, or was it a deliberate political act, a way of preserving testimony and defying an oppressive system? For you, in the quiet darkness of your room, it feels like both. It is the only thing keeping your mind alive, and it is your one silent, powerful no in a world that demands your constant, placid yes. The little pencil stub has not opened the door of your cage, but it has given you back the key to the universe inside your own head. Your small acts of rebellion, the secret journal, the shared glances of solidarity with the other women create a fragile, hidden world of sanity within the institution's walls. But the world of cures continues to evolve in ways that are deeply and truly terrifying. One evening, during the approved socialization period in the parlor, you overhear a conversation between two of the younger, visiting physicians. They are speaking in low, excited tones. Their words laced with a kind of gruesome, scientific enthusiasm. They are talking about surgery. They mention the work of an American doctor, a surgeon who has developed a bold, and in their view, brilliant new theory. This doctor argues that for the most chronic and intractable cases of hysteria, the root of the problem is not in the nerves, but in the ovaries. He calls them the storm centers, the biological generators of the hysterical tempest. His solution is logical, direct, and final. The procedure is called a normalovariotomy, a term that is a chilling masterpiece of clinical euphemism. It means the surgical removal of healthy, non-diseased ovaries purely for the purpose of treating a psychological or behavioral condition. The theory is that by removing the source of female hormonal and nervous irritation, the patient will be rendered permanently calm, docile, and free from her hysterical symptoms. She will be cured by being surgically unsexed. The doctor's words paint a clinical, bloodless picture, but you can imagine the reality. Surgery in your era, even with the recent advent of anesthesia and antiseptics, is a brutal and dangerous affair. The idea of a surgeon invading the core of your body, removing a part of you not because it is sick, but because your personality is deemed inconvenient, is a horror of a different magnitude than the water jets or the rest cure. This is not about managing you. This is about permanently altering you. This surgical approach to hysteria represents the absolute peak of the medical belief that female psychology was reducible to female anatomy. It was the ultimate, horrifying expression of the wandering womb theory, just updated with a scalpel. And it was frighteningly common. Thousands of women in the late 19th and early 20th centuries underwent this procedure for conditions ranging from anxiety and depression to simple troublesomeness and disobedience. Historians of medicine are still shocked by the legacy of this practice. They debate the motivations of the surgeons who performed it. Were they butchers engaging in a form of medicalized violence against women? Or were they true believers operating at the very edge of their scientific understanding, convinced that they were performing a life-saving procedure for women in profound distress? The truth, as is often the case, is likely a murky combination of both. Some surgeons were undoubtedly driven by ego and a desire for fame, while others were likely acting out of a genuine, if terrifyingly misguided, therapeutic zeal. A particularly grim and telling detail is that the success of the operation was often judged by the patient's subsequent behavior. If a woman became placid, obedient, and lost interest in things like education or art after her ovaries were removed, the operation was deemed a triumph. The very things that made her an individual were seen as symptoms to be eradicated, and their absence was celebrated as a return to health. As you sit in the parlor, pretending to listen to the gentle piano music, the doctor's conversation hangs in the air like a toxic fog. You look around at the other women. The poet with the ink-stained fingers, the geologist with the faraway eyes. Which one of them is stubborn enough to be considered a candidate? Which one of them might be the subject of the next enthusiastic surgical discussion? The threat is no longer just about your mind or your freedom. It has become visceral. It is about the physical integrity of your body. The sanatorium, which once felt like a prison for your mind, now feels like a place where your very body is in danger. The stakes have been raised, and the unspoken thought that has been growing in your mind for weeks now solidifies into a desperate, urgent plan. You cannot be cured here, you can only escape. And the only way to escape is to convince them that you are already cured. The looming, unspoken threat of surgery changes the emotional climate among the patients. The quiet, simmering resentment you all shared begins to curdle into a palpable fear. The secret jokes and shared eye rolls become less frequent, replaced by a new guarded watchfulness. The doctors are no longer just misguided fools to be subtly mocked. It's in this atmosphere of heightened anxiety that you have a moment of connection that is different from anything you've experienced before. It happens with the poet, the woman with the ink-stained finger. Her name is Eleanor. For weeks, your interactions have been limited to fleeting glances and whispered, fragmented conversations during your supervised walks. But one afternoon, in a rare moment of lax supervision, you find yourselves alone for a few minutes in a secluded corner of the invalid's garden, near a crumbling stone bench overgrown with ivy. She is paler than usual, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrors your own. She tells you in a hushed, trembling voice that she was recommended for a surgical consultation. Dr. Albright had told her family that her uterine obsessions were showing no signs of improvement and that a more permanent solution might need to be considered. The threat is no longer a hypothetical horror story you overheard. It is here, in this garden, sitting beside you. You don't know what to say. The usual words of comfort feel hollow and absurd. Instead, you simply sit with her in the silence. You don't touch her, such a gesture would be too conspicuous, too easily noted by a passing nurse, but you feel a powerful, invisible current of solidarity flowing between you. You are two human beings trapped in the same nightmare, and in this shared moment of terror, you are not patient and patient. You are simply Eleanor and you. Then she does something extraordinary. She reaches into the sleeve of her dress and pulls out a tiny, tightly folded scrap of paper. It is a piece she has torn from the margin of a book. On it, in her elegant inky handwriting, is a single, short stanza of a poem. She pushes it into your hand, her fingers cold and clammy. Don't let them read it, she whispers before a nurse's voice calls her name from across the lawn, and the moment is broken. You slip the piece of paper into your own sleeve. Later that night, in the near darkness of your room, you unfold it. The poem is not about flowers or love, or any of the ladylike subjects of acceptable female poetry. It is about a bird, a hawk, trapped in a cage, beating its wings against the bars until they are bruised and broken, all while its keepers murmur about how its frantic, desperate movements are a sign of its inherent madness. The words on the page are a perfect, crystalline expression of everything you have been feeling but could not articulate. It is a testament, a protest, and a cry of pain. In giving it to you, Eleanor has done more than share a poem. She has shared a piece of her soul. She has trusted you with her truest, most dangerous self. This kind of intense, supportive relationship between female patients was a common, if officially discouraged, feature of life in 19th century asylums and sanatoriums. Doctors often viewed these friendships with suspicion, labeling them unhealthy attachments or morbid intimacies, fearing that the women would only reinforce each other's delusions. But for the women themselves, these bonds were a lifeline. They created a space for mutual recognition and emotional support in an environment that was designed to isolate and invalidate them. Historians who study patient narratives from this period often find that these friendships were the most crucial element of survival. The ability to have one other person who saw you not as a diagnosis, but as a human being, could make the difference between enduring the experience and being completely broken by it. The debate continues on how to classify these relationships. Were they simply friendships forged in a crisis, or do they represent a form of proto-feminist collective, a small-scale resistance movement? As you lie in your bed, clutching the scrap of paper, you know that this is a turning point. Eleanor's fear, her poem, her act of trust, it has solidified your resolve. Your plan to perform sanity is no longer just about your own survival. It is about all the other women in this place, the painters and the geologists and the thinkers. You cannot save them, but by saving yourself you can bear witness. You can carry their stories and Eleanor's poem back into the world. The fight for your freedom has become a fight for their memory. The poem in your pocket and the fear in Eleanor's eyes become the fuel for your new, desperate project. The performance of a lifetime. You understand now with a cold, clear certainty that logic, protest, and truth are useless here. The only language the doctors understand is the language of their own textbooks. To be free, you must become the woman their theories predict. A hysterical patient, successfully cured. You must transform yourself into a living embodiment of their success. The transformation is a conscious, deliberate, and exhausting act of self-erasure. It begins the very next day. At breakfast, you eat every last spoonful of the bland porridge, and you even offer a small, polite smile to the nurse on duty. In the treatment block, during the icy hell of the jet douche, you do not flinch or gasp. You stand still, enduring it with a kind of placid martyrdom. You are no longer a resistant body. You are a compliant vessel, gratefully receiving the cure. During the mandatory rest period, you lie perfectly still, your eyes closed, breathing deeply and evenly. You project an aura of profound, meditative calm, even as your mind is racing, planning, rehearsing. In the parlor, you abandon your quiet corners and your intense whispered conversations. You take up needlepoint. You had always hated it, the tiny, repetitive, but now you embrace it. You sit in a straight-backed chair, your head bent over a piece of linen, and you sew clumsy, uneven flowers. You become a portrait of contented, mindless domesticity. You learn to modulate your speech. You pitch your voice a little higher, a little softer. You never offer an opinion, but you are ready with a pleasant, agreeable response to any question. When doctor asks you how you are feeling, you no longer speak of your mind. You say, "I feel my nerves are much soothed, thank you, doctor." You use their words, their concepts. You are reflecting their own worldview back at them, and they are delighted. This process of performing sanity is a well-documented phenomenon in the history of mental institutions. Patients throughout history have quickly learned that the only way to earn privileges and ultimately release was to conform to the institution's definition of mental health. They had to suppress their true feelings, abandon their unhealthy interests, and adopt the persona of the ideal cured patient. The historical debate here is a subtle but important one. Was this performance a cynical, manipulative act? Or was there a more complex psychological process at play? Some scholars, drawing on theories of institutionalization, argue that after a while, the mask can begin to merge with the face. The constant performance of a role can start to genuinely change a person's behavior, and even their sense of self. It's a frightening thought. You risk losing the person you actually are. You feel this danger keenly. Each evening after the performance is over, you retreat to the secret world of your pencil stub in the margins of your book. This is where you shed the mask. You write with a new urgency, documenting the performance itself. You write about the feel of the needle in your hand, the false smile on your lips, the way you have to bite your tongue to keep from screaming. Your secret journal is no longer just a record of your suffering. It is the anchor to your true self. It is the place you remind yourself, night after night, that the placid, needle-pointing woman in the parlor is a character you are playing, not who you are. The change in your behavior does not go unnoticed. The nurse's entries in the daily ledger begin to change. Miss displayed a cheerful and cooperative attitude today. Her appetite is much improved. She has taken up needlework and seems quite content. Dr. Hyde, Albright is visibly pleased. He sees you as his triumph, a testament to the efficacy of his methods. He has taken a difficult, intellectual, ambitious young woman and transformed her into a quiet, placid, and appropriately feminine creature. He doesn't see the performance, he sees the cure. And you, the master actress, let him believe it, because his delusion is your only ticket out. After 3 months of your flawless, exhausting performance, the day you have been working towards finally arrives. Dr. Albright summons you to his office. He is beaming, a portrait of professional pride. He declares you recovered. The word sounds alien, absurd. You have not recovered. You have surrendered, or rather, you have staged a perfect, strategic surrender. He informs you that he has written to your father, recommending your release. The news spreads through the patient community in hushed, excited whispers. Your imminent departure is a source of vicarious hope for the other women. If you can get out, maybe they can too. Eleanor presses another scrap of paper into your hand. This one does not contain a poem. It contains an address, a post office box in a nearby town. A way to stay connected, a lifeline thrown into the future. It is a profound act of faith, a belief that you will not forget them once you are on the other side of the wall. Your last day is a surreal exercise in polite goodbyes. You thank the nurses who monitored your every breath. You thank Dr. Albright for his excellent care. The words feel like ash in your mouth, but you say them with a convincing, grateful smile. As your father's carriage pulls up the long gravel drive, you take one last look at the magnificent, oppressive building, the gilded cage. You feel a dizzying mix of elation and a deep, so-aching sorrow for the women you are leaving behind. Then you are free. The carriage door closes, the gate shaped like climbing roses swings open, and you are on your way home. The air outside feels impossibly fresh, the colors of the world shockingly vibrant after the muted tones of the sanatorium. But you quickly discover that freedom is a fragile and complicated thing. You return home, but you are not the same person who left. And you are not treated as the same person. You are now the former hysteric. The label follows you, a faint but indelible shadow. Your family treats you with a new, suffocating kind of care. They watch you for any sign of a relapse. A thoughtful silence is mistaken for melancholy. A passionate comment on a piece of news is met with worried glances. They are walking on eggshells around you, and in doing so, they are building a new, invisible cage around you, a cage of low expectations and constant, loving suspicion. Your old life is gone. Your books on science and politics remain locked away, deemed too dangerous. Your desire for an education is now completely off the table, an ambition that is forever linked to your illness. The performance of placid femininity that you perfected in the sanatorium must now continue, indefinitely, in your own home. You won in the sense that you escaped, but you lost in the sense that the world you have returned to is now even smaller than the one you left. This was the harsh reality for many women who were released from these institutions. Their cure often came at the cost of their ambitions and their identity. The diagnosis of hysteria, even once cured, created a permanent blot on a woman's reputation, affecting her marriage prospects, her social standing, and her family's trust in her judgment. Here, historians debate the long-term impact of the rest cure and similar treatments. Did they have any lasting therapeutic benefit at all? The evidence is overwhelmingly to the contrary. The most famous example is the writer Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who was subjected to Drive, where Mitchell's rest cure and was driven to the brink of a complete mental breakdown by it. Her terrifying experience became the basis for her classic short story, The Yellow Wallpaper, a chilling account of a woman's descent into madness while undergoing the very cure that was supposed to save her. Gilman's story, and others like it, serve as a powerful counter-narrative to the doctor's triumphant case histories. They are the patient's testimony, a record of the damage that was done in the name of healing. You are not broken, not completely. The core of you, the part that origins of a book with a stolen pencil stub, is still intact. But you are wounded. And you are profoundly changed. You have learned a hard and bitter lesson about power, and about the terrifying ease with which a woman's mind can be dismissed, diagnosed, and controlled. The bars of the sanatorium window are gone, but you feel their shadow on you still. The years begin to pass. You live a quiet life, a life contained within the narrow boundaries that have been set for you. You marry a respectable, if an exciting, man chosen by your father. You run a household. You arrange flowers, you pour tea. On the surface, you are the very picture of a cured woman, a testament to the success of Dr. Ive. All Bright's methods, but beneath the placid surface, you keep a secret fire burning. You maintain a clandestine correspondence with Eleanor, sending and receiving letters through her secret post office box. Her letters, filled with poetry and sharp, witty observations about the absurdities of the sanatorium, are a vital link to your true self and to the women you left behind. And as you live this quiet, double life, you begin to notice a slow, almost imperceptible shift in the world around you. The ideas that once seemed so solid, so unshakable, are beginning to crack. The word hysteria, once the most powerful and feared diagnosis in a doctor's arsenal, starts to sound a little old-fashioned. You see it in the very magazines that come to your house. The same publications that once printed dire warnings about the dangers of novel reading fever and female education are now cautiously celebrating the new woman. This is a new, startling figure who is educated, independent, and often political. She rides a bicycle. She campaigns for the right to vote. She is, in every way, the embodiment of everything that was once diagnosed as a hysterical symptom. But now, she is not universally seen as a patient. She is seen by some at least as the future. The medical world, always a reflection of the society it serves, begins to change too. A new generation of doctors is coming of age, and they are less impressed by the theatrical performances of Dr. Charlton, more interested in the new sciences of the mind. The old theories, the ones about wandering worms and pelvic congestions and overstimulated nerves, start to look less like cutting-edge science and more like a collection of strange, antiquated myths. This decline of the diagnosis of hysteria is a fascinating chapter in medical history. Why did such a powerful and pervasive diagnosis begin to fade away at the turn of the 20th century? Historians offer several explanations, and they all seem to have played a part. First, the growing movement for women's rights and suffrage directly challenged the social assumptions on which the diagnosis was based. It became harder to label a woman's desire for independence as a disease when thousands of women were marching in the streets, demanding it as a right. Second, medical science itself was advancing. Improved understanding of neurology and endocrinology provided alternative, more plausible explanations for symptoms that were previously lumped under the hysterical umbrella. Conditions like epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, and hormonal disorders could now be diagnosed more accurately. Here's a specific and crucial detail. The work of researchers on shell shock, what we would now call PTSD in soldiers during the First World War, was a major turning point. Doctors saw men, brave soldiers, exhibiting the very same symptoms: paralysis, fainting, anxiety, emotional outbursts that had for centuries been dismissed as a uniquely feminine, hysterical weakness. It became impossible to continue blaming these symptoms on a faulty uterus when men, who didn't have one, were suffering in the exact same way. This forced the medical community to abandon the gendered, womb-centric model and to start looking for the cause in psychological trauma, not in female biology. The term hysteria doesn't vanish overnight, but it begins to lose its clinical prestige. It's gradually replaced by a new set of terms: anxiety neurosis, conversion disorder, psychosomatic illness. The language is changing, becoming less theatrical, more psychological. For you, this slow, creeping change is a source of profound and bitter vindication. You watch as the world slowly catches up to a truth you have always known in your bones. You were not sick. The world was. The box was too small. The diagnosis of hysteria was not a description of your mind. It was a description of a society's fears. As the old certainties crumble, you feel the shadow that has followed you for so long begin, finally, to recede. In your later years, living in a world that is now lit by electricity and connected by the telephone, you encounter a new name, whispered with the same mixture of reverence and controversy that once surrounded Charcot. The name is Freud. He is a doctor from Vienna, and he is talking about hysteria in a way that is utterly dizzyingly new. You read about his work, finding articles in more progressive journals that you now feel bold enough to bring into your home. He and his colleagues are not interested in your uterus or the state of your nerves. They are not interested in applying electricity or jets of cold water. They are interested in your memories. They are interested in your dreams. They are interested in your story. Freud is proposing a radical idea: that the symptoms of hysteria, the paralyzed limbs, the unexplained pains, the fits of anxiety are not random malfunctions. He argues they are a kind of language, a physical manifestation of a painful memory or a forbidden desire that has been pushed out of conscious awareness or repressed. The body, he suggests, is speaking a truth that the mind cannot bear to voice. The cure, therefore, is not to silence the body with rest cures or surgery, but to help the patient listen to it. He calls his method the talking cure. This is a seismic shift. The patient's own voice, the very thing that was systematically dismissed and reinterpreted as a symptom by your doctors, is now being framed as the central to love healing. The idea that a doctor would simply sit and listen, encouraging you to speak freely about your thoughts, feelings, and past experiences is so contrary to everything you endured that it feels like a revelation from another planet. You read about one of his famous early cases, a woman known as an O. Her real name was Bertha Pappenheim, a brilliant and imaginative young woman who, after the death of her father, developed a host of classic hysterical symptoms, including paralysis and disturbances of vision. The doctor treating her, Joseph Brewer, a colleague of Freud's, discovered something remarkable. When he encouraged her to talk about the distressing events and emotions connected to the first appearance of each symptom, the symptom itself would temporarily disappear. She called the process chimney sweeping. It was the birth of psychoanalysis. This shift from the body to the mind, from the uterus to the unconscious, is the final, definitive nail in the coffin of classical hysteria. Freud is, in essence, relocating the drama. The problem is no longer a physical defect in women, but a universal human conflict between desire and repression, between past and present. He is taking hysteria away from the sole domain of female biology and placing it in the realm of human psychology. Of course, the Freudian shift is not without its own profound problems, a fact that historians and feminist critics have spent the last century unpacking. Freud and his followers, while revolutionary in some ways, were still men of their time, and their theories were rife with patriarchal assumptions. They often traced a woman's problems back to her supposed envy of men or to unresolved childhood desires related to her father. They simply replaced the tyranny of the wandering womb with the tyranny of the Oedipus complex. The debate over whether Freudian psychoanalysis was ultimately a liberating or a confining force for women is one of the most complex and heated in modern intellectual history. But for you, looking back from the vantage point of a long life, The specifics of Freud's theories matter less than the monumental change in direction he represents. He and his contemporaries may not have had all the right answers, but they were finally, after centuries of willful blindness, asking the right questions. They were looking for the story behind the symptom. They were acknowledging that the inner life, the world of memory and emotion, was a territory as real and as powerful as the world of flesh and bone. They had, in their own complicated way, finally conceded the point you have been trying to make all along, that the source of your suffering was not in your body, but in your life. You are an old woman now. You sit in a comfortable chair by a window, and the sunlight that falls on your hands is warm and kind. The world you look out upon is a place your younger self could not have imagined, a world of horseless carriages that move with impossible speed and voices that travel through wires. The sanatorium, Dr. Ian, Dr. Out. The ice-cold water jets, they feel less like a memory and more like a strange Gothic novel you read a very long time ago, a story about someone else. In your lifetime, you have witnessed the official death of your disease. In the middle of the century, you read a small article in a newspaper that you cut out and saved. It reported that a committee of doctors, in a thick and important-looking book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, had officially removed hysteria as a formal diagnosis. Just like that, a flick of a pen, a consensus in a conference room, and the illness that had defined and confined a generation of women was declared to be no more. It had vanished into thin air, a ghost finally exorcised from the house of medicine. But you know it's not that simple. The ghost still lingers. Here is a peculiar thing you've noticed. The name has disappeared, but the attitude has not. You see it when a friend's daughter is told her chronic pain is just stress. You hear it when a brilliant, passionate young woman is described as too emotional or overly dramatic. The vocabulary has changed, but the underlying grammar of dismissal remains. The tendency to dismiss a woman's suffering, to locate its source not in her circumstances but in her own flawed, feminine nature, is a stubborn old habit. The wandering womb has been laid to rest, but its phantom still occasionally kicks. And this is the final, great debate for the historians who now write about your era. Has society truly been cured of this way of thinking, or has the illness simply shape-shifted, taking on new, more subtle names? Is the impulse to pathologize female experience truly gone, or has it just learned to speak a quieter, more clinical language? As you sit in your sunlit room, you suspect you know the answer. The crudest tools, the water cures, the ovariotomies, have been retired to the dusty Museum of Medical History. But the more subtle tools of disbelief and dismissal are still in use. Sometimes you take out a small, lacquered box. Inside is a tiny, worn-down pencil stub and a collection of brittle, yellowed scraps of paper covered in a faded, elegant hand. They are Eleanor's poems. She was never released. Her literary obsessions were deemed incurable. But her words, her hawk beating its wings against the bars, survived. They are your most precious possession. They are the faded scar that reminds you of the disease you were forced to endure, a disease whose only true symptom was a fierce and inconvenient desire to be free. And so the story of that life, with its quiet sorrows and its fierce, hidden strengths, finds its gentle end. The final page has been turned, the last word has been whispered. The voices of the doctors have faded into the deep silence of the past, and the cold chill of the water cure has been warmed by the long, slow sunlight of the years. You can let the memory of that gilded cage dissolve now, its iron gates melting into the soft darkness behind your eyes. All the restlessness, the frantic energy, the feeling of being trapped, you can let it all go. It is just a story now. And its weight can be set down. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing to fight against. There is only the here and now, the feeling of the pillow beneath your head, the easy, quiet rhythm of your own breathing, rising and falling like a slow, peaceful tide. Let the silence of the room be a comfort, a safe harbor. And as the last echoes of my voice fade away, you might find that the story has become a dream, and that the dream is now your own. There is nothing left to do but to drift, and to rest. The path of our story concludes here. If you need to walk a little further tonight, you know where to find other gentle trails. Rest well, Good night.